back with Talk in the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, host. Tonight on the second half of our show, we shift gears. Always love to have authors that certainly take up topics of interest to the broader community. Tonight, I'm very pleased to have joining me a first-time author from Charlestown. Kathleen Urquhart joins us to talk about her new book. It's called Pigtails and Potter's Field, and it's just out and available. We'll give you more of the details on how to get it, but I want to welcome Kathleen to the set. And thanks so much for coming in and joining us. All right, tell us about Pigtails and Potter's Field, and I think those that watched the trailer there got a sense, but tell us what it's about, first of all.
Well, the short version that I give people is that it's about an Irish family and their struggle to overcome a devastating betrayal. A little bit longer explanation is that it very poignantly takes on a very timely and relevant topic that is facing our world today, and I consider it a crime against humanity. It has to do with sexual abuse. I think one of the key draws, if you will, of this book is the reader's ability to identify with the characters so quickly, almost immediately, because they can see part of themselves in that.
Well, and interestingly enough, it touches not only on Boston, but Ireland, of course, this being perhaps the most Irish American city in America, of course, is a part of it. But what was the impetus when you talk about anything and some disturbing and detail in terms of incest, child sexual abuse, that kind of thing. Now we've, of course, with all the news that has come out around church scandal and various other scandals, but what was the impetus for you? How did you come up with this? It is a work of fiction, I should say.
It is.
But I think the genre is realistic fiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how did you come up? What was the impetus for it? How did you come up with the idea for this?
Well, I think in any really good story, there has to be elements of truth. And in my situation, we had a family member who...
Your family?
Yes. Who, for years, attempted these type of acts. I was fortunate in that I was the older child and I was able to get away. But other family members were not as fortunate and suffered for years and terribly at the hands of this individual. It was, it's difficult because you want people to relate to your story, but you also want to be sensitive to your family members who, had no idea that this person was the way that they were. And so I tried to maintain a balance there and not talk too much to the point that, it would be insensitive to them.
Right.
And I'm learning how to find that as I go out with this book.
Protect the innocent that are involved in it.
Yes.
But, that had to be difficult, though. And this is your first book, so how long did it take you to write this book?
Oh, gosh, well over a decade.
Yes.
Well over a decade.
Yeah.
But, life happens, and the nice thing about it, I used to be embarrassed when I would say that it took that long to write, and even longer, actually, probably closer to 12 or 13 years. Yeah. But I evolved with the characters. The way that
What do you mean?
Well, the way that I would have written a character
a dozen years ago, I have a different perspective on it now. This book, though it is not, it is fiction, but it was inspired by true stories, and by billing it as realistic fiction, it can closely relate to, societal issues that we have, life events such as, marriage, divorce, death, or situations like alcoholism or drug abuse. So that realistic aspect of it is what draws the reader in so that they immediately identify, because I find today that we are in a generation where the concentration of sexual abuse is so prevalent that, there is no one that seems to go unscathed by that now.
Well, and I think it's fair to say it was hidden for so long, and only now is coming out. And still, I don't know that people are surprised by it, but nonetheless, it's deeply disturbing. I want to read some of the reviews here, and this by various people, but just for our readers' edification, our viewers' edification. And these were all listed. Incidentally, these are Amazon reviews, which you can find online. This is one of the best books I've read in a while. It had me laughing out loud and sobbing while blindly reaching for tissue. The characters came to life for me. Would love to see it on a big screen. I could not put the book down. Thank you. Another one said, it's a great read. It had everything you could wish you could wish got. Mystery, intrigue, as well as a little bit of romance. It's a great read for anyone. And finally, and there's a number of these, but Pigtails and Potter's Field had my interest from the first chapter. Loved the Boston and Ireland connection of the main characters in the book, et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting. So great reaction. Were you kind of on pins and needles, kind of waiting to find out how it would be reviewed? And
well, no, because this was the first time that I've attempted something like this. And I did try and go the traditional publishing route and, had my fair share of rejection letters. And then I thought to myself, why should I do that to myself if I'm relying on feedback from these, so-called professional publishers and literary agents? They have so much work that they really can't take the time. And so I decided I could do something with this myself.
So what did you ultimately decide to do?
Well, I went with a company and I self-published and, tried to bring my subscription base up in Facebook and the social mediums. But then once I got it out there, LinkedIn was a fantastic avenue for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I was able to make connections with people. You just pick someone and just say, I'm going to focus on just telling them my story, and I wasn't trying to bluff my way through it. I just thought I would just put it out there. And that type of writing, that sort of organized thought, enthusiastic descriptions, engaging characters. And I just reached out to people and it worked for me. And I had a number of different options. And I was recently signed with W. Brand Publishing out of Nashville, Tennessee, Julie Brand. And she's wonderful and a great group of people. And I think we're going to do some amazing things together.
Helping to, and do I understand there's some interest, television, big screen?
Yes, that's where our focus is with this, because it lends itself to a very concise story, but with plenty of room to grow. Obviously, family are the ones that encourage you the most. My dad has read this book 3 times now, and he calls me and he'll say, Kathleen, I have an idea. Why don't we do this with these characters? And and he actually has come up with some really good ideas. And I'm like,
Great.
Dad, I think I will incorporate it in that. and what's nice about it is it also keeps you accountable. I really enjoy writing. So this is something that when I signed finally for a television miniseries, I can't wait to get started.
Well, it's not an easy thing to do. I wrote not for this kind of publication, but in newspapers for a long time prior to doing this, and it's a lot of work. And when did you decide? How did you decide that this is what you wanted to do? And is it a full-time thing now for you? Or?
No, I have not been able to leave the day job yet.
Yes.
I work as an executive assistant to the president of a small private liberal arts college here in Boston. Okay. And it's a wonderful job. But this is something that I did, when I would go home in the evenings. But what spurred me on was seeing the effect that it had on various family members. And then I was able to process the emotional pain by way of writing poetry. And in the beginning of the book is the poem.
Yeah.
And how I started is I wrote this poem, Pigtails and Potter's Field, inspired with the thought of a little girl Potter's Field, to me at that time, came from what my primary focus was the biblical explanation of a potter's field, and it represented the place where the greatest betrayal of faith took place, and that was of Judas to Jesus.
Okay.
And so that's what happens in the life of an individual who experiences sexual abuse, is there is a betrayal that takes place, a trust factor that's broken.
Hard to repair. Is this, well, it's certainly, and again, I would emphasize, it is a work of fiction, but is it in some ways a call to arms, a call to action for people that, this is a topic that's been swept under the carpet for a long, long time, but, people are starting to realize, the kinds of things that took place and are still taking place. Is this a call to action?
I believe it is. Certainly, I would be willing to align myself with any individual or group of individuals who are seeking, to help people overcome these type of traumatic events. I refer to them as personal and intimate transgressions. I think that silence is no longer an option. Silence is what has caused so many people to force it inward, and then the outward manifestations always result in some sort of perhaps addictive or self-destructive behavior.
How do you portray the abuse in the book? Because it's, it's no matter how you slice it, it's a dicey topic, and it presented in the wrong way, it can be taken the wrong way too.
Right.
Rather than salacious details type. Nonetheless, to make it realistic, you have to offer some level of detail. So
exactly.
How did you deal with that?
Well, I came about it from the perspective of what the child was thinking at the time that it was happening. I did try to keep a very fine line of respecting, the individual, even though they were characters that I made up. There is a level of respect and dignity that you want to give to the victim, but you also want to highlight and draw attention, not so much to the physical abuse itself, but to what's going on in the mind of the perpetrator.
Right. Yes, and how the victims ultimately, and hopefully they do in the book, overcome. This kind of abuse. How did you do that?
Well, because I had a lot of feedback from family and friends and study, I spent a number of years studying psychological cases of this, actually having to read books that got you inside the mind of a pedophile, and it's not a place that you want to linger, I can tell you that much. But, hurt people, and it's cyclical. It tends to be cyclical. And I found that by understanding where the victims and where the perpetrators were coming from, it made it a little bit easier to be able to draw our attention to the plights of both people. Safe boundaries obviously have to be maintained, but I think that, I was able to come at it more from the perspective of what the child was thinking at that time. So, and I think that was what was so heart-wrenching for many people, knowing that what the child was thinking at the time.
Based on that, and of course every case is different, but is it hard for victims to ever trust again, to establish normal, so-called normal relationships, which can sometimes be rocky as well. But what did your research show you?
Well, I think that we go back to the whole understanding of not remaining silent, not keeping it to yourself. Chances are, when you speak about it to somebody, they're going to be able to relate, because again, like I said, the concentration in this generation of abuse is so widespread that many people can relate to it, either directly or indirectly. Nobody seems to escape from this today. So, I find that
I mean, are there uplifting moments in the story?
Sure. Oh, sure. Yes, there are great, wonderful moments where
I don't want you to give it away because we want those that are interested to read it as well. Again, the book is called Pigtails in Potter's Field, and the author Kathleen Urquhart is here with us. But how do you weave that together to make it? Because obviously, from the reviews, people have loved it. But how do you do that?
I saw it in my mind's eye as sort of like a mosaic, and it doesn't follow just a natural chronological, 2, 3, 4, 12, It's sort of like snapshots of the person's life, which is why I chose that for the front cover, snapshots of moments and images, and I would take those as the highlights of their life and work the story from that situation. And it just worked. It blended. And the character development is something that I have been complimented on quite a bit, because it takes a very complex, dynamic and manages to weave it all together. So there's that intrigue of, how is this all going to come together? How is this going to happen? But it does, and it blends.
And again, the storyline, the family, at least, is it more than one family that is following, or is it mainly one family?
It's mainly one family. There are a few others.
And they come from Ireland to Boston? Is that the...
Yes. Well, the family, the father is an Irish citizen, marries, he goes to school at Dartmouth and meets his wife at Lesley College. And they raise their children on Cape Cod, Chatham, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And they're dual citizens. And, the family is involved in land development and property in Ireland. And the son is an engineer. And, so the characters, the main characters are, fairly well off, but they worked hard for that. And that ethic is woven throughout. They're not an Irish family that take anything for granted. They know where they've come from, and they know where they're going, and they take the steps to ensure
But in terms of the storyline, what plays out most prominently?
The bonds that, though tried to the extent where most would break, they come to the realization together that there are boundaries that need to be established. And some of them are very difficult, but they must maintain them in order to feel safe within the relationships. And, relationships, part of the way they were, are sacrificed and changed forever.
Yes.
It's never the way that it was before, but it provides a lot of continuity in terms of how the family can go on after something like this. But decisions must be made, and communication must be open. One of the things that I tell people about is that the perpetrators, they have a cultivated ability to listen. And today, children are drawn to that because parents are so busy, and our world itself is so technologically fascinated and fixated that they don't...
Complicated.
They don't talk face-to-face like we are right now. It's texting. And, when your child says to you, "I'm fine," they're really not. And you don't know that because you're not looking at them.
Right, and you're not seeing them. Now, and we've got just a minute or two left. I got to ask you about this, of course. And this involves not that it's solely, but a Catholic family, and so there's a lot of different threads wound in here, and the little pieces that I was able to read, and I found it very interesting, incidentally. But I was thinking to myself, how much is your own faith? How did that weave into your writing and the storyline? How did it affect it?
Well, my faith is based, its foundation is in truth. And there are so many lies that surround situations like this. People end up living lies, they deny things, they submerge them, and they, again, manifest in different behaviors and outworkings later in life. It's better to, to focus on and have as your goal the discovery of truth. Because even though it's painful, and even though it may cause heartache in the beginning, it's better that the truth come out and be told.
She'll set you free, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And of course, and it's still going on, but the whole child sexual abuse scandal that rocked the Catholic Church, first in America, now in Ireland, really indeed all over the world. Was that a factor in how you...
I have a very interesting take on that. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I attended an all-girls Catholic high school. And when I was writing this book, I had wonderful priests when I was in school. I have to tell you that. They were just wonderful. The nuns were very caring and...
Wait a minute, let me see your knuckles there.
No, I never had that happen.
I'm teasing.
I came close once, but...
Yeah.
But I had a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And, I wanted people to understand. There is an antagonist in the story. Obviously, there is a priest who is a wonderful man of God, true to his calling, and would give his life for the flock, for the church, and one who is very close with the Callahan family in my book. But obviously there's always an antagonist too. So there's a rogue pedophile priest from Ireland whose abuse ripples across one ocean and 2 generations. But I had this interesting epiphany as I was writing the book, and that is, if there's another message that I could put forth in this world, because we are so desperately in need of having a sure foundation, I don't want people pulling away from their faith because painted with a wide brush is the statement that all priests are pedophiles. Right. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think it's magnified because of the level of trust that we place in an individual who supposedly represents God.
And for many years, blind trust. But, they're not cut from the same cloth, and not making light of anything there. But again, for our viewers, if you're wondering, the book is called Pigtails and Potter's Field. The author is here, Kathleen Urquhart, Charlestown resident, and her first book, very, very interesting, fascinating look at, it's a fictional work following a family, but some sexual abuse involved, including incest, and the reviews are fabulous. Those that want to pick up a copy of it, how can they find it? It's nicely done and nice cover. And where can they buy it, or where can they find it?
It's available on Amazon.com. Yep. It's also available on Barnes & Noble. And if you would like to explore my website, www, say that 3 times fast.
Yes, I'm no kidding, right?
Urquhart.com. Right. I offer autographed copies that I sign and I can mail out to them. Right. One of the things I do want to clarify, though, it's not about incest. It's about sexual abuse.
Sexual abuse, and,
I mean, that's another form, obviously, but that's not in that storyline. Right. So.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
I enjoyed talking with you again. One last time, the book Pigtails and Potter's Field, Kathleen Urquhart, and you can find it at Amazon or on her website, kurquhart.com. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight. You've been watching Talk of the Neighborhoods. We're here tonight and every Thursday night at the same time. Until next week, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN, I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.